Welcome. The City of Wilmington Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023 is called to order. Would you rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Attorney, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All matters requiring commission action shall be presented to the Planning Commission by the planning staff and the applicant. In situations where planning staff is the applicant, there will be only one presentation. City staff will make the first presentation. The applicant will make the second presentation. Both presentations are limited to 5 minutes each. To maintain an orderly meeting, all presentations shall proceed without interruption unless the commission desires to intervene with questions or comments. The chair will open the public hearing for those physically present wishing to speak about an item. Those in favor of an item shall be heard first, followed by those opposed to an item. 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in favor. 10-minute time will be allowed for public comment in opposition. We have a staff member who will be tracking the time. Is that Ms. Painter? Thank you. And we'll notify speakers at the 5-minute mark, the 1-minute mark, and verbally call time when it expires. The chair, in their discretion, may extend these time periods. All groups, organizations, neighborhoods, or similar associations desiring to comment are asked to appoint one spokesperson to present their concerns or point of view to the commission on each agenda item. The public has been encouraged to submit their comments in writing via a web-based form located on the city's website. All comments received prior to 9 a.m. today were forwarded unedited to the Planning Commission. All comments will be delivered to the City Council when the item advances. All comments received will be made available to the public if requested. Our votes will be voice votes after proper motions are made and consistency statements read into the record. The chair will state the outcome of the vote and the action. Rezoning requests that receive an unfavorable recommendation from the Planning Commission may be appealed by the applicant to the Wilmington City Council. Appeal should be in the form of a letter submitted to the city clerk within 10 days of this hearing. Any items being appealed will tentatively be heard by the City Council in September. Commissioners, the minutes from July 12th were in your packet. Are there any discussion? If none, I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion is that on? I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
Commissioner Pollack has moved to approve the minutes from July 12th. In a second.
I'll second it.
And we'll do a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Moving on to our new business. Our first item is a conditional district rezoning of a property containing 1.99 acres located at 525 Ponderosa Lane from R15, moderate density single dwelling district, to R5, medium density mixed residential conditional district for a 6-lot residential subdivision. And our staff presentation will be by Ms. Nicole Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. The proposal before you this evening includes one parcel containing approximately 1.96 acres and is located east of Ponderosa Lane and south of Westchester Road. This map provides context and highlights the site location. To the right of the slide are images of the subject site's existing conditions. This slide illustrates the existing conditions from adjacent roadways. Left of the slide are images looking north and south on Ponderosa Lane. To the right of the slide are images looking east and west on Westchester Road. This slide illustrates the existing development pattern within the vicinity. West of the site along Ponderosa Lane is a cemetery. North of the site, east and south of the site are single-family detached dwelling units. The primary zoning in the area is R15 with single dwelling homes serving as the primary land use. However, staff would recognize that there are a variety of lot sizes in the general vicinity. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject site from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to R5 CD Medium Density Mixed Residential Conditional District for a 6-lot residential subdivision. The proposed lots range in size from 6,405 square feet to 8,101 square feet. All lots exceed the R5 district minimum of 5,000 square feet. The development will extend and improve the existing access easement known as Ponderosa Lane in accordance with city street standards, including sidewalk on both sides of the right-of-way. The development also designates approximately 20.9% of the property to open space, exceeding the 10% open space requirement for the R5 district. The comprehensive plan promotes quality design and site planning so that new development, infill, and redevelopment is implemented with minimal adverse impacts on desired character of the existing built environment. The plan further states infill sites that have been historically difficult to infill or redevelop within existing neighborhoods should be developed in a manner that is compatible and consistent with the existing development pattern. The proposal utilizes existing utilities and increases the housing supply while protecting desired neighborhood character through infill development. Based on the information contained in the case summary and the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, staff believes the request is reasonable and in the public interest and recommends conditional approval with the conditions outlined in the case summary. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff?
Yeah,
Commissioner Pollack?
I do. Nicole, good evening. How are you? There was a section in here on the site history that talked about 3 waivers were granted over the part, over the history of the site. If this zoning were to be granted, would those waivers then just go away because it's a whole new governing set of parameters?
Right. If you'll recall, a couple of packets ago, we made a text amendment that required any design adjustment committee decisions or Board of Adjustment committee decisions to be made prior to City Council approving anything to ensure that what's being proposed before this board and City Council ultimately are realistic and can comply with code.
Okay, so if adopted, the new code would lay over any existing waiver at that point?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Excuse me. Second question I have, and this is going to be,
Vice Chair Pollack, could you move the microphone closer?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The second thing is I'm on table 3.5.3B, which is vehicular traffic. Basically, if I read the table right and sift through the existing and proposed, basically what we're proposing, since there's nothing there, what is being proposed is 97 new average, two-way trips a day. Is that what that's saying? I mean, I realized you got 81 and 97, but since there's nothing there, it's going to be 0 to some number.
There's actually a single-family dwelling on the site today that is
Okay.
proposed for demolition, but your interpretation of the chart is correct.
So what is the bare minimum for a traffic study? Is it 100?
It would be 100 trips that occur during either the AM or the PM peak.
Okay.
Your AM peak hour would fall between 7 and 9 AM, and your PM peak between 4 and 6 PM.
So in this case, even in the total or the subsets, it would not dictate a traffic study at this point.
That's right. A traffic
Okay.
impact analysis was not required of this proposal.
The last question I have, and maybe this is for the applicant, but as the staff has looked at this proposed rezoning, has there been any discussion about, does any of this impact the cemetery that's sitting across the street? I noticed as I drove in and, just bend the road and look to the right, there's an old cemetery, but nonetheless a cemetery there. Is that not impacted by this?
The development itself won't impact that particular site. They will be able to take access off of an improved Ponderosa Lane
Okay.
should this development be approved,
So so the cemetery will get to benefit from a new road?
and a sidewalk.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's all I've got for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Woodruff?
Just real quick, yeah, I noticed in the packet, we don't have a schematic of the proposed two-story homes that are going to be built. I don't in my packet. Was any presented?
There were not elevations included as part of this proposal. You're being asked to take a look at the subdivision.
Okay. It was just in the narrative, it said that was what was planned, but okay. The other thing, the improvement of the road that's on the, I guess, the east side of this, the Ponderosa, that's the access to this lot that's to the south of the development?
I'm not sure what your question is. On the screen, outlined in red would be the improvements that are proposed for the extension of Ponderosa Lane.
But is that the only access for the lot that's below that, that's contiguous with lot 6 and 5 and 6?
Right. Ponderosa Lane currently dead ends at that parcel, the adjacent parcel.
And is there to be, I mean, and I know that it's going to be improved to city standards, but will it be a city street so that it'll be a public way for the lot that's there to the south of this development?
What's outlined in red would be built to city street standards.
I understand that, but will it be a city street,
Yes.
a public way? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
Do you know what kind of stormwater approach or design strategy you've got planned right now for that part of the open space that says open space and stormwater?
I would defer to the applicant. Since this is a conceptual plan, it has not gone through a full technical review. They did receive some comments on the necessity to comply with the stormwater ordinance once they go through entitlement and seek approval.
All right, thank you, Ms. Smith. And the applicant is here for a presentation. Welcome, Ms. Wolf.
Thank you very much. My name's Cindy Wolf. We appreciate staff's thorough summary of this case, and I know you have a full agenda. They are all requests for increase in residential density. And as it occurs, I'm the representative for not just this petition, but also items 2 through 5. So rather than belabor the same justification that we believe is paramount in every one of these petitions, I'd like to just start with a few pertinent comments that should resonate throughout the evening. You don't go a week without some publication or media report about the influx of new residents to our area and the deficit of housing opportunities that's expected to continue. This includes both owned and rented. It includes single-family, attached, and multifamily. They're all referenced. The lack of supply and the high demand continues to drive the cost of inventory that we do have up. This affects affordability not only for the future, but for our existing citizens. The Bowen Housing Needs Assessment was assembled in 2020 and has just been updated for 2022. The original report showed an extensive deficit of homes for the foreseeable future. Overall, Wilmington area housing needs for rentals from 2022 through 2032 is over 12,000 units, and for sale is over 16,000 units. Both represent increases from the housing gap since the former study was completed, meaning that even with all of the current development that we have going on, we're losing ground on successfully providing for the need. Most everything you deal with on this commission revolves around the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Land Use Plan, which is intended to be a guiding document for fostering economic development and sustainable stewardship of the city. The policies for growth and development encourage safe and affordable housing to be available to every citizen. As I proceed with this and the other zoning amendments, please keep in mind that housing preferences are not solely the R10 and R15 single-family lot template that has dominated the suburbs in the past. Future development needs to include diversity of housing type, as a mix of housing types helps create a broader range of residents to support a vibrant community. And with that, I'll get into Ponderosa. Some of these are duplicates of what Nicole has shown you, but basically with the area, you can see that that subject site sits at the end of the stub road from Westchester, and unfortunately, the Stratford Place community that surrounds it was not stubbed to this property for future interconnectivity. The subject tract, as she showed, is at the end of the pavement of Ponderosa, and it is currently city-maintained. Previously, it was a family estate that this was included in. It occupied by several homes. In '99 is when the stub road from Westchester, that was formerly called Dartmouth, was renamed Ponderosa. And as you saw before, the cemetery is on the one side, the Smith family is on the other side. The house that is on it will be demolished. The proposed development of Ponderosa Lane is a single-family division, but with smaller lots than an R15 as an R5. We propose to extend that Ponderosa Lane to the city standards, dedicate it to the city for maintenance, and for the development of 6 new home lots. Each of those lots are in excess of the 5,000 square feet, which is the minimum for lots in R5 district, but the overall density, because of the open space we've set aside, is still just 3 lots per acre. Public water and sanitary sewer mains will be connected to the CFPUA system, new fire hydrant to meet the service distance requirements, and the soils are extremely sandy. The preliminary stormwater management design is for an infiltration basin in that area designated that can also be used for passive recreation. An infiltration basin is usually considered what they call a dry pond. Protected trees on the tract were located by a professional surveyor and then inventoried by a certified arborist. We have to remove 1 specimen tree, which is a large longleaf pine, and we will be going to the Board of Adjustment to complete that, but that pine is right beside the building that is going to be demolished, and it is right beside the septic system, so we believe that there would have been issues with it. In exchange, we're saving and have conditioned that the other specimen trees that are here and significant trees will be saved as part of the preservation in the open space. We appreciate staff's thorough review, concur with the consistency findings that they have shown before you, and hope that you'll agree that their positive recommendation for approval is something that you would also recommend. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Thank you for your consideration for our very full agenda. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Kofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Ms. Wolf. One question I have, as you mentioned the other agenda items we'll be looking at, is that this one does not include elevations. You mentioned single family, and is there something in here that says specifically detached single family? Or, you know?
Well, they're lots.
They're
So
lots.
we have committed that this is a 6-lot subdivision, which would allow single-family uses on each lot. Now, that single-family use can include accessory dwellings, just like every other R5 lot.
I guess my question is, and correct me if I'm reading this wrong, would be if we do an R5 zoning and these lots are greater than 7,000 square feet, would that allow for an attached duplex?
I guess it would, but we've committed to single-family with the possibility of ADUs.
I'm just not sure if I've seen any commitment to single family in the language.
That is a condition we'd accept, but there's only 1 or 2 of them that are, I guess, even large enough. I hadn't even considered that possibility. This is a single-family proposal.
Okay, thank you. And my follow-up question, which, again, just to the east of the property where is this a private access easement, or will that whole horseshoe become dedicated?
We can't dedicate property that is on the Smith property, which is the property to the southwest. There is a home, there is a mobile home, I believe. At this point, there's just 2 residents over there. We will dedicate Ponderosa to their property line. What they have now is solely a private access easement, and obviously it's unimproved. So they will then yield not only the improved access from the end of Ponderosa Lane, but from the other end that's stubbed to their other part of their property line. I've done some sketches in the future, and the hope is probably that Ponderosa will just become a loop. but at this point, I can't commit to that. It's someone else's property. But we've done everything we could to make this, the interconnectivity and the access to those folks possible.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Ms. Wolf.
Anything else, Commissioner Lennon?
So you're giving them, as opposed to one private access easement, two dedicated ingress and egress points?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Pollock?
Ms. Wolf, question. If this were not approved, so this is kind of a from-to question. If the current zoning stayed in effect, you know, after tonight, and assume you appeal that to the city council, assume it ends up staying, what would that mean in terms of what you could put there versus what you're asking to put there?
It's roughly 2 acres. We would still have to improve a streetscape, and we could get up to 4 units on a private access easement.
So this.
So we'd have to improve the western side of that Ponderosa that's just straight on through. Then we could build a private access easement for 15,000 square foot lots. That's pretty much
So
it.
this basically, the proposal gives you a couple more lots.
That's correct. And if you take a look at the Westchester development, just about all of those units are non-conforming to the R15. They're roughly 9,000 to 10,000 square feet themselves.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you
Wolf.
very much.
All right, I'll open the public hearing. Now, is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of agenda item number 1? Anyone here to speak in opposition of agenda item number 1? Just come to the podium and start with your name and your address. And make sure you've signed in with the clerk before you go.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Smith, and I live at 524 Ponderosa Lane. It's not really in favor or against, but I have a question. Mr. Pollard, you asked about a waiver. Could you, I couldn't hardly hear you. Could you restate that question?
Well,
statement?
he'll do that after the public hearing. So just
Okay.
I'll take note of your questions, and we'll make sure they get answered after the public hearing.
Now, so I can't ask the question now?
Yeah, it's just your time to speak, so we'll
Okay,
answer your questions after the public hearing.
so you, okay, I can give
Yeah,
my
anything
questions
you'd
now?
like.
Okay, all
yeah,
right, all right.
anything
I'm
you'd
sorry,
like
I'm trying to get understanding.
I'll make
because
note
I
of all
don't-
your questions, and we'll get them answered.
Okay.
But this is your stage. This is
Okay.
your time.
Okay, the road access, where the waiver was one, and then the road access, when we come around to that loop right there, I want to know the impact that it's going to have on us. How would that affect us when they started doing their in construction? Will we be able to get in and out of that road? You know, because she said it's going to be a city road, then it's going to break off. Well, actually, that's what we're doing now. We're coming off a city road into our, well, it was our road, but, you know, onto that road. But I want to know, what would that impact be to us? Will we still have that easement to get in there? Will that affect what we already have? And I know it will affect it some kind of way, but anyway. It was something else dedicated, I think Mr. Woodruff said something about the 2 dedicated something. I'm lost now, but anyway, it was another question I had about the dedicated, I think it was the dedicated road, about the cemetery. Someone said about the cemetery, how they can have access to that road. How would they know that they got access to that road? How would the people know that uses that cemetery? How would they know this, that they have access if, you know? And what type of housing will be built? I know they want these lots, 6 lots, but would they be high-rise, would they be low-rise? What would it look like? That's just a couple of questions that I have.
Thank you. We'll make sure we get these answered after the public hearing.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. Anyone else here to speak on agenda item number 1? All right, the public hearing is closed. Would the applicant like to come back up and answer some of the questions?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Certainly during construction, that pathway that they use will be somewhat affected, but we'll work with them to make sure that it is not adversely affected. It could be done in sections, so that they could use the one access rather than the other access. So that's customary with construction in general, but no, that does not cut off their access or their rights to access in any way during construction. The access easement will be basically removed in favor of a public street. So they will continue to have access in a better way with a public street, with sidewalk, with curb and gutter, with pavement up to their property line in two places. And I think that's where she was asking about the dual access point. As I said, the single-family lots would be constructed with whatever is approved in a single-family R5 lot. And that would be basically up to 45 feet, but we're committing to the two-story and a single-family with the possibility of an accessory dwelling. As far as the cemetery goes, it would gain frontage, just like it has on the front section of the already improved Ponderosa Lane, just additional frontage on a paved street. And what happened with, and there will be a sidewalk along that frontage. So that's just an added plus, if you will. As far as the waivers go, I think there might have been a little confusion by Mr. Pollack. The waivers were for the design of the curved part of this road. Generally speaking, the minimum radius on the center line of a road is 100 feet for a minor local residential road. We asked and were granted by the DAC a waiver for it to be an 80-foot radius, and the reason of that was if that curve was flattened out, it was jeopardizing those two oak trees. The other waiver that we asked for was the length of a dead end. Again, we're stubbing at this back end of the curved road, which makes it an over-length cul-de-sac, if you will. We have provided the turnaround, which is the city standard for emergency vehicles. Hopefully one day, this may in fact loop around, and then there wouldn't be any issue whatsoever. Our loop from a through street would not be any longer than the 800 feet. But these are all just sort of technical standards that we're working towards. The waivers are conditional upon us being approved for this project in the first place.
And regarding the access to the cemetery, that's up to the cemetery to put the curb cut and signage and all that.
Yeah, I don't know that they'd put a curb cut anywhere along there. If you look into the cemetery, I mean, that's all planted, if you will. And so if they wanted a curb cut, we could certainly probably provide that, but I don't know that there's any parking area available along that frontage.
Okay. Commissioner Woodruff? Oh, okay. Any other?
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. All right. Commissioners, what do we think about this one?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just one correction. The maximum height in the district is 35 feet, not 45 feet.
Thank you. The maximum height is 35 feet. 35? Yeah. All right. Commissioner Adams?
This is maybe an internal question for us, but the 5 recommended conditions don't say anything about limiting to single family or number of stories. If the applicant is saying that that's something they're willing to commit to, do we need to add that to this list of conditions?
That sounds like the applicant was willing to do that, so yes. No, the 35 feet is going to cover the two-story, so the height restriction is going to cover that right? Or is that three? That's 3 stories if they're squeezed.
It's 35 feet, so we do not specify the number of height in stories.
Okay.
Mr.
I
Chambers
mean,
is going to-
I think that would come down to the building design. If you can squeeze 3 floors in 35 feet, I can't answer that question.
You can? Commissioner Adams says he can.
I was-
Commissioner Pollak?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so it could be 2 stories and a heck of a peaked roof.
So
Or
we'll
a big attic or something.
make sure the condition number 6 reads that the lots will be single-family with a maximum of 2 stories. Okay. All right, what's the will of the commission? Commissioner Kofer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had a previous hearing or agenda item on Holly Tree in general. I think everybody on the commission may recall my thoughts and feelings with Moonlight. I think both staff and the applicant pointed out that this area is it's a bit eclectic with regards to the zoning and the existing as-built nature of, it's a lot of there's some R5, there's some R10, and there's some R15, so it's already, a good site for a project of this nature. To speak to some of the public's concerns, though, just to make sure we've articulated ourselves properly, the building height limit would be 35 feet, but the applicant's saying that they're willing to go with 2 stories, and they're also willing to make sure that these single-family properties are detached rather than attached. So they will be detached, single-family, 2-story properties. And with regards to the private access easement that exists today, it will be significantly improved to access your property as a neighbor, and then all of us, once it goes to the city, collectively as taxpayers will maintain that very well improved access. So should be of great benefit to the existing as-built neighbors and surrounding area, and really fit nicely in the fabric of the Holly Tree community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, what's the will of the commission? Commissioner Lennon?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move approval for agenda item number 1, rezoning of 525 Ponderosa Lane from R15 to R5 conditional district. Request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest, as the proposal will encourage a cluster development pattern and achieve open space preservation, enhancing the existing physical development pattern of the area. I'd further add to the motion the inclusion of the 6th condition of detached single-family 2-story structures.
Well done. Do we have a second for the motion to approve agenda item number 1?
I'll second.
Is there further, there's a second, but is there further discussion?
Just, it was brought up about this curb cut for the cemetery. I'm assuming out there's no curb cuts, it's just raw land, but if they put in.
Commissioner Woodruff, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Closer to your mic.
I'm sorry. I'm assuming there is just raw land there leading into the cemetery, and if we're putting in curbs, I would propose, and I think Ms. Wolf suggested they would, but there'd be a curb cut to allow somebody for a vehicle to pull in there, because right now they could without any obstruction, but if we put curbs in there, it would prohibit somebody from entering the cemetery in a vehicle if necessary. So I would just add that as an additional condition number 7, a curb cut into the cemetery, if appropriate. If not,
Okay, well, I would like to address it so that we can, okay, thank you.
I'm not sure whether you're promoting a curb cut. This will be roll curb. It'll be type H, I believe is what it's considered. So if someone wants to drive into the cemetery legally, hopefully, that would not be a problem.
then I got no problem. That's
Okay,
fine.
it is not stand-up curb.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf.
I'll withdraw my whatever.
Thank you. The motion is to approve agenda item number 1. It's been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes 6-0. And we will be moving on to agenda item number 2, which is a conditional district rezoning of property containing .76 of an acre located at 4211 Spirea Drive from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to R5 CD Medium Density Mixed Residential Conditional District for a 2-lot residential subdivision for a total of 8 units. And our staff presentation is by Miranda France. He said he didn't.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. This is public hearing number 2, conditional rezoning of 4211 Spirea Drive, CD3 823. The site is located west of the intersection of South College Road and Spirea Drive and contains approximately .76 acres and is currently occupied by a single-family dwelling. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request, as well as photos of the subject property. These are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property. These are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. Commercial uses are located to the north and east, with single dwellings to the south and vacant land to the west. The site is currently zoned R15, Moderate Density Single Dwelling District, and the site is bordered by RB to the north and east and R15 to the west and south. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject site from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to R5 CD Medium Density Mixed Residential Conditional District for an 8-unit residential development. The proposal includes a 2-lot subdivision. Lot 1 will be 18,883 square feet and will contain a quadruplex structure and 3 off-street parking spaces. And Lot 2 will be 14,140 square feet and contain a quadruplex structure and 9 off-street parking spaces. Access to the development will be provided off of Spirea Drive. Elevations show pedestrian access from Spirea Drive. The site is located within a suburban commercial retrofit area of opportunity and along a special character street on the comprehensive plan's growth strategies map. The plan supports low to medium density residential areas and or low intensity mixed use developments to serve as transitions between lower density neighborhoods and more intensive commercial, residential, and mixed use areas. The proposal utilizes existing utilities and increases the housing supply while protecting desired neighborhood character through infill development. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and that the request is reasonable and in the public interest. Staff recommends conditional approval with the conditions listed in the case summary be applied. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Ms. France. Any of the commissioners have questions? Commissioner Kofer raised his hand first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jumping in front of you, Mr. Pollock. I did have one question that sort of jumped out, and it looked like a bit of a conflict in my packet.
Sure.
At some point, we talk about 3 off-street parking spaces and 9 off-street parking spaces, which would be page 2 in our packet. And then we jump to page 7 under parking, and the applicant proposes a total of 20 off-street parking spaces, including 8 driveway spaces. So I'm confused as to how much parking this project offers.
Yes, quadruplex structures require a 2-space minimum per unit. So we have included the driveway spaces in the 20-space total. However, the off-street parking spaces are the ones to the rear and the 3 off to the side.
Okay, so
There's a total of 20.
you separate, so off-street parking is what we see out
Yes, sir.
away from the driveway, away from the garage?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry, I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And that was my only question.
Good question. Commissioner Pollock?
Could you go back to the picture that as you started your presentation?
Sure.
And it was the one, right there. What are the red stars? What do they mean?
The red star is the commercial located east of the site.
So 2 different places, okay? Okay, so it's just a commercial versus something else, yeah?
Yeah, it's a key to the
Yeah, where's,
aerial.
okay, all right, that's all.
Anyone else? Questions for staff? All righty, thank you, Ms. France. We'll welcome back Ms. Wolf.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Cindy Wolf, and here on behalf of the owners of this site. As she pointed out, I think this particular case, it's important to acknowledge the location of this lot. And being on the north side of Spirea, there we go. I think sometimes my zoning maps are a little easier to read as far as the red is commercial, it's regional business. Certainly the MDs, you're aware of that, and this is where we sit. So on the two sides by commercial. However, I think it's important to just acknowledge that Capital Ford owns everything all around us other than across Spirea Drive. This is the site plan as the question was answered. The front quadruplex these are both situations of attached single family, but the front one is a little bit different type of housing product that does provide a single car garage. So there are technically 3 spaces for all of those at the front. But we had some room, and certainly it's always good to provide some guest and overflow parking. We had room for those 3 spaces that are there. The back building would not include garages, and so everything is parking area, parking for that. We provided the turnaround, and unfortunately that, takes away a good bit of space back there, but the length of that parking drive is such that we needed to have the turnaround for the emergency service vehicles. So this particular site is just a different type of housing product. It's still R5, it's the attached single family. You saw by the site plan here how it would lay out. There are several significant trees, specifically those 2 right in the center and the 2 off to the right that we had to work around. The one is an amazingly large sycamore and the other a maple. But we worked with those in the center, and that would be some open space for the community. The 2-story nature, the garages, we addressed the requirement now for any attached housing to still address main streets, and that's why this end unit would have a door off to the side and sidewalk out to the public sidewalk. As said before, we believe that a project like this with a little bit higher density is appropriate as a transition from Spirea to everything behind it, which is commercial. Certainly, you could see by that zoning district map that there are several other smaller developments that have occurred in the Winter Park Gardens neighborhood over the past several years that are also R5, that are also attached single family. Infill development where services are already available reduces housing development costs and will restore housing options and diversity. Location-efficient housing should be promoted and encouraged for sustainability and adaptability of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Lennon?
Can you go back to show the picture where the garage, okay, so that's actually looking from the side. Now go back to the one you were just
Sure.
at.
Right.
Okay. So my question is, because it was a little bit, how far is the edge of that building from the right-of-way?
In this particular case, because of the trees that are out there, we're showing the sidewalk, public sidewalk on our side of it, which would therefore be then in a public access easement. The setback, the front setback in R5 is 10 feet. And so basically, that is on the 10-foot mark. But if there had been a porch or anything, porches and extensions of uncovered canopies, that sort of thing, can encroach into a front setback up to 8 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
I'm going to piggyback a little bit about that short end of the building. The image we're looking at here is not the same elevation that's in, I guess, page 36 of the packet that we had.
It is not, I guess Miranda didn't substitute it when we came with the 3D rendering. I did my best effort to take the original art. The architect just gave the front elevation, you know, with the garage doors, the main doors. I knew that that end elevation needed to address the street better than it did, and that was my stab at trying to do that. This is the final elevation that we've included in the packet as our proposal, and it did satisfy all of the requirements of the attached housing.
Okay. That's good to hear. I mean, I think it could still do more.
Sure,
So that
I
it doesn't.
agree. That could very well be a sliding glass door. If you look at the floor plan that, you know, they hope to work with, that is into the living room, so it could very easily be a sliding glass or something like that. And we have, I believe, if staff would agree, some leeway in fine-tuning it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cofer?
Just to follow on Commissioner Adams' heels, I'm glad that you brought that up because I was hoping you would, and maybe if we had to get down in the deliberation part of the board, but, you know, the quality design and site planning, being an advocate for that, it's just great to, you know, for everybody to hear. One thing, I'm going to contradict myself because I'm just not afraid to do that. So is this a special character street?
No, Spirea isn't, I don't believe. But all attached housing now has to do that. Then we do have the special character frontage streets, which include, I believe, Oleander and Market and whatever those are.
Okay.
So it is sort of consistent with any type of attached housing, any street that it fronts on, correct?
Right.
That's right. It's a special character street per the comprehensive plans growth strategies map, but it's not within the frontage standards of Oleander and Market and.
Okay, yeah, that was kind of confusing too. When you look at those comprehensive maps and you see this is a special character street, here's the contradiction. I love the fact that this developer and this site plan offers an additional amount of parking. I think that's just generous and you know, I think it's great. But when you read down and deeper into the special character street, it says that, you know, as a city, we do not want much on-surface parking and on special character streets. So there's my contradiction.
Well, on the
I like
frontage of
but
it.
On the
And
frontage, is that what it's
right.
specific to? Okay,
They don't want the parking between the street and the building.
okay. thank
That's
you.
what often is the interpretation of it.
All right. I digress just for my own knowledge here and education. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. My only question is it looks like from one of the site plans, it appears that the parking is pervious pavement?
I think that that is probably one of their initiatives for their stormwater management. We haven't gotten down to the brass tacks of that yet. Obviously, this would be a proposal for infiltration since we don't have an area for a pond. So one of those methods is certainly making the parking spaces, making the driveways porous pavement. Generally, you like the main drive aisle to be paved just because of its greater amount of traffic or trip generation. But those details haven't been worked out. There'll be a balance, I'm sure, of both.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you,
you
Ms.
again.
Wolf. All right, we'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone in favor, anyone who'd like to speak in favor of agenda item number 2? Anyone here who'd like to speak in opposition of agenda item number 2? Come to the podium and start with your name and your address.
Hey, my name is Bryce Masterson. I live at 4210 Spirea Drive, which is directly across the street from the proposed project. I'd just like to say I'm a longtime Wilmington City resident, and I submitted some comments to the Planning Commission, and I hope that you guys would consider and review that, and just wanted to come and say thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on agenda item number 2? All right, the public hearing is closed. Commissioners, what are your thoughts on this? Commissioner Adams?
I appreciate trying to develop a odd, quirky little piece of, land that's really landlocked by Capitol Ford. So, again, I think that this is a creative way to add a different type of housing in a area, in a site that's frankly kind of underutilized and, forgotten in a lot of ways. So, on those lines, I don't have any real objections to it. Again, I'm put my architect hat on, and I would still challenge you to figure out ways that front elevation along Sperea, that you can bring as many porch window fenestration patterns like the long side, and really, try to bring good traditional practices of having architecture equal eyes on the street with that short end of the building in the final design.
The applicant. Would the applicant return to the podium, please? Commissioner Lennon has a question, and then I will as well.
Yes, sir.
I think to pick up on Commissioner Adams' point, I'm looking at this, Ms. Wolf. The actual schematic that you have.
Mm-hmm. And actually, now that I see that, it is the same elevation.
It is, and what I'm paying attention to are all the trees that are showing up on the edge of Spirea
Yes.
that don't show up on your illustration. That's
Well,
the point I'm trying to make. And so are those proposed plantings that would go?
No, these are existing trees on this proposed site plan.
That will
And
stay.
if possible to save them, certainly that's why the sidewalk is on the property side.
On the inside, if you will. Forgive me,
Inside,
but
yeah.
The inside of the trees.
There is a ditch along there. It is more of a swale than a ditch, so I don't know that we have reason to necessarily have to take those trees out. But we will be required to do a sidewalk, and we have 10 feet to work in. So if you consider the inside of the property line. So I was just a little careful, I guess, on my, sometimes I get taken to task about my schematics or my colorful concepts, because I do add trees, but these are the existing trees that are there, and certainly we'll try to save those during construction simply because otherwise they'd be mitigated, and it comes with a cost. And certainly the view for Mr. Masterson, I know he has a very busy front yard as far as a lot of vegetation and trees, so you really can't see his home from the street, but I understand his concerns as, a longtime neighbor, and not only the property he has, but some other rentals along the street.
Since we're going to see a lot of you this evening, I'll just ask this question now, but you made a comment that you haven't gotten down to the brass tacks of stormwater, but can you just explain very briefly what you have to go through to get that brass tack?
A project like this, which proposes under pavement infiltration, has to have the soils tested. Those soils have to be in a certain criteria to be satisfactory for that type of use, which includes the seasonal water table depth and the infiltration rate. Certainly, there is a pre-post requirement for stormwater management on all projects, and this would satisfy that because it covers more than 10,000 square feet of impervious surface, even though the combination of the two lots is still less than an acre. It kicks in the stormwater management or stormwater permitting process with the city.
Right. So, but define pre-post, just.
The pre-post is, as it sits now with a single home and barely a dirt driveway, a couple utility buildings, they will calculate the runoff capacity of this during a particular storm, which I believe is the 7.5, it's the 25-year storm, and there's a lot of more details there. After development is complete with the new built-upon surfaces, all of those surfaces have to drain and off of the site in no greater capacity than they do now. To accomplish that, you either have to have a pond, you have to have some type of infiltration. In this particular case, the infiltration basin underneath the pavement would involve sort of what they'd call a French drain. It would be a cubical, long section of trench that is covered with filter fabric and filled with gravel. And then the volume of that capacity is calculated such that that water is covered for the detention from surfaces.
So if I'm really oversimplifying for this and other potential submittals, you're taking an area that has no treatment and providing stormwater treatment.
That is correct.
to it.
And in this particular case, we're also providing or would dedicate the public utility easement because we have off-site water from Capitol Ford running over this site. There's the ditch. You can see the topography off on the east side of the site. That ditch would be cleaned out as necessary. There's 3 large pipes at the bottom that then go across Spirea and then go into a city system that does have easements through the Winter Park Gardens neighborhood. So generally speaking, often these types of developments and the improvements that are made actually improve what's going on. We're certainly upstream of what's going past us, but providing the public easement is a positive. Making sure that it flows and that the existing pipes aren't clogged, that's always a requirement that they go through when they're designing and when they're constructing for approval. I think that's covered you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Any other comments? Any discussion? I think it's a appropriate land use according to our comprehensive plan. It's what we design the codes to encourage, and the location of it between commercial and single family is a really appropriate, it's an appropriate use there to kind of buffer the single family from the commercial. So that's the idea behind that best practice. And it sounds like the applicant has done a lot to keep trees and between the single family and across the street. All right, what's the will of the commission?
I'm ready to make a motion if there's no others. Okay. I'm going to make a motion that we approve agenda item number 2, which is case number CD-3-823. I'm recommending approval. The request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, and that would be the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. The Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest because the proposal would allow for a compatible infill development and would increase the housing stock in an existing residential area.
Thank you. Commissioner Pollack has moved to approve agenda item number 2. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Adams with the second. All in favor, voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Next up is agenda item number 3, conditional district rezoning of property containing .69 of an acre located at 111 and 113 Avondale Avenue from R10 medium density to single dwelling district R5 CD, medium density mixed residential conditional district for a 4-lot residential subdivision for a total of 4 units. And our planner, Ms. Bonovic, is here to give a staff presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So again, this is public hearing number 3, conditional rezoning of 111 and 113 Avondale Avenue, CD 4823. The site is located on the north of the intersection of Oleander Drive and Avondale Avenue, containing approximately 0.69 acres and is currently occupied by 2 single-family dwelling units. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request and the existing site conditions. These are photos of the existing conditions. These are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. The site is currently zoned R10. The site is bordered by R10 to the north, south, east, and northwest. The site is bordered by R5 CD to the west. Single-family residential is surrounding the site. The applicant proposes to rezone the subject site from R10 medium-density single-dwelling district to R5 CD medium-density mixed residential conditional district for a 4-lot subdivision for a total of 4 units, 2 existing single-family dwelling units, and 2 proposed single-family dwelling units. The 2 existing single dwelling units are currently located on 1 lot, and the rezoning and subdivision proposed would remove a nonconformity and bring the lot into compliance with the Land Development Code. The sample photograph shows the style of architecture being proposed on site. The site is located within the areas of opportunity, live, work, innovation. The comprehensive plan supports quality design and site plan to promote that new development, infill, and redevelopment is implemented with minimal adverse impacts on the desired character of the existing built environment. This proposal increases the housing supply while protecting the desired neighborhood character through infill development. Staff believes that the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and that the request is reasonable and in the public's interest. Staff recommends conditional approval with the conditions listed in the case summary be applied. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know Cindy is here as well to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Lennon?
The picture, excuse me, the picture you showed us, are those, that's the proposed but not the existing, right?
Do you mean this photo here?
Yep.
I believe that is, and like I said, I'll defer, that is the existing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And the existing homes are going to remain, and we're just, the proposal is to add, to rezone so that there could be 2 more.
Yes, ma'am.
Added.
So
Correct?
the 2 lots, 113 and 115 Avondale are existing. They're just subdividing that so that they're on their own lots, so that they are conforming with the R5 standards. And then the 2 lots to the north, the 109 and 111 Avondale, would be the 2 new single-family dwellings.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much.
And the applicant is here. Welcome back, Ms. Wolf.
I'm Cindy Wolf, and representing the owners of this property. The Avondale subdivision was created back in 1944, and interestingly enough, it had over 225-foot wide lots. You can see, generally speaking, with the lot lines, that most of those lots ended up being combined in at least 2 at a time, and so that's how a lot of this community has been developed. Over the course of 2019, 20, 95, you can see that other properties within the community were zoned to R5 so that those lots at just 50 feet could be conforming. So as it exists right now, there are 2 existing homes. That was sort of another snafu that occurred back when these were built about 10 years ago or something like that, that for whatever reason, there was no lot line assigned and 2 buildings got built on the same lot. So a certain amount of this is somewhat of a housekeeping exercise, that not only are we making arrangements, as she pointed out, so that these lots are no longer non-conforming, but also we have the lot beside it that is 50-foot wide, and we believe that it makes sense to avail it to the same type of development that is there already. These are the existing houses side by side. They would have the same exact architectural style. It was important to one or two of the neighbors that we did not exceed the one-story, and so these are 2 one-story, single-family lots that we are proposing, and we are not asking for any accessory dwellings, just so that's an aside. With that, we think that this infill development should be implemented with minimal adverse impacts on the desired character of the existing environment. That's why we committed to the one-story and the same exact architectural style that is there. One of the comments that was made during the public information meeting was that parking along Avondale can be precarious. You can see that the 2 existing structures are a little closer to the road, but they do have adequate parking for multiple cars that are required. But we have moved these buildings back, so we have additional parking driveway, if you will. Plus, those 4 trees that are shown are existing, and so we're working around those. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Anybody have questions at this time? Commissioner Kofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Cindy. Yet another sort of self-serving question for my own education, but just say that lot of record, R10, and you just wanted to build a house and an accessory dwelling unit. Could you, by right, it's less than an acre, by right, just take down all the trees on this whole site?
Yes, the lot that exists, the northern lot, if you want to say, is 100 feet wide, so it meets the R10 requirements in that respect. So yes, they would have to apply for a building permit because it is currently vacant, but if a building permit were applied for, it would be exempt then from any of the tree regulations.
Okay, so that's, so really any of the conditional district rezonings we look at when we see a condition of tree preservation, especially with specimen trees, that's over and beyond what, if somebody were just to build by right, they could take any tree down they preferred, effectively, once they get their building permit.
That's certainly one of the advantages to the city's control, if you want to say that, but also the advantage to developers to provide the conditional district rezoning rather than the old conventional, the straight rezoning, because you can apply certain conditions that are of a benefit to everyone.
Thank you. I thought I had that correct. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Would the applicant agree to condition 6, the one-story, since they're committed to
Yes.
keeping them one-story, single family?
Madam-
Commissioner Lennon?
Actually, maybe this is a question for Brian or staff, but which I agree with that, but wouldn't the final site plan that goes through TRC indicate the single-story nature of the?
As a single-family lot, this would be exempt from subdivision regulations, so we would just supply a plat with 4 lots delineated. Then each of those building permits, it wouldn't go through TRC in a situation. There are no major improvements to this. This would just be a house permit on a lot, but it's creating the R5 lots, is what we're asking the approval of under conditions, and that condition can include the single-story architectural style that is already there.
This is not for you, but we might need to, in the future, change the language then, because the second condition specifies TRC review.
Oh,
So,
gotcha.
yep. I was trying to save us from adding another.
All right, thank you. We will open the public hearing at this time. Is anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item number 3? Anybody here to speak in favor of agenda item 3? Okay, anyone here to speak in opposition of agenda item 3? Anyone here to speak on agenda item number 3? All right, the public hearing is now closed. And since we don't have any comments from the public hearing to address, commissioners, what are your thoughts?
I think this is exactly consistent with Ms. Wolf's opening statement and the new land development code, and I'm prepared to make a motion if there are no other comments from.
Anyone? All right, what's the will of the commission?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve agenda item number 3, the rezoning of 111 and 113 Avondale Avenue from R10 to R5 conditional district. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington, the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and the Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest, as the proposal would allow for compatible infill development and would increase the housing stock in an existing residential area. Further add the addition of condition number 6 to the 5 indicated in the packet, limiting the structures to single story.
Nicely done. Do we have a second for the approval of agenda item 3?
I second.
Commissioner Pollak with the second. And everyone in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 6-0. Next, we have agenda item number 4, a conditional district rezoning of property containing 1.19 acres located at 114 Longstreet Drive from R15 moderate density single dwelling district to R5 medium density mixed residential conditional district for a 3-lot residential subdivision for a total of 12 units. And Ms. Franz is back with us for the staff report.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. This is public hearing number 4, conditional rezoning of 114 Longstreet Drive, CD 5823. The site is located south of the intersection of Shipyard Boulevard and Longstreet Drive and contains approximately 1.2 acres and is currently vacant and heavily wooded. This map shows the general vicinity surrounding the request as well as photos of the subject property. These are photos of the existing conditions surrounding the subject property. These are photos of the adjacent properties and land uses. Commercial uses are located to the north, multifamily uses to the east and west, and single-family residential to the south. The site is currently zoned R15, moderate density single dwelling district. The site is bordered by ONICD to the north, MD17 to the east and west, and R15 to the south. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject site from R15 moderate density single dwelling district to R5CD medium density mixed residential conditional district for a residential community containing 12 units. The developer has proposed to subdivide the lot into 3 lots and construct 3 separate quadruplex units. Lot 2, fronting Longstreet Drive, would include rear-loaded unit accessed off the proposed shared drive, and lots 1 and 3 would also be accessed off the shared drive. A multi-use path will be provided along Longstreet Drive and the southeastern property line. Elevations show pedestrian access to Longstreet Drive. The site is located within a greenfield sites as multi-use places area of opportunity and along a planned green connection on the Comprehensive Plan's Growth Strategies map. The plan promotes low to medium density residential areas and/or low medium density mixed-use developments to serve as transitions between lower density neighborhoods and more intensive commercial, residential, and mixed-use areas. Comfortable, safe, and convenient pedestrian places should be promoted through buildings that face the street, avoidance of deep front setbacks, and providing direct pedestrian connections and entries along the public space network. The proposal improves existing utilities and increases the housing supply while protecting desired neighborhood character through infill development. Staff believes the proposed zoning amendment is consistent with the recommendations of the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and that the request is reasonable and in the public interest. Staff recommends conditional approval with the conditions listed in the case summary be applied. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and Cindy is still here.
Thank you. Commissioner Pollock?
Ms. France, can you go back to the site plan?
Sure.
Okay, bear with me a minute. You come off of Long Street, you come into the development, right?
Yes, sir.
Is that the only in and out?
Yes, sir.
So that's it? How then, as you look at the, I'm looking at, on our next page, we have the Long Street townhomes, the color picture. I'm assuming that is the design that the applicant is committing to.
I would defer that to the applicant.
That's fair. Okay, then I'll wait for my next
Okay,
question.
sure.
I'm trying to, and this is probably for the applicant as well, I'm trying to understand how this height-wise and all that relates to the group of condos that are, or group, development that's in back of it. So maybe I need to defer to the applicant for that one as well.
Sure. I will say that in the residential zoning district, the maximum height is 35 feet, as stated before. Multifamily districts can allow for higher heights than 35 feet.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Adams?
As a point of reference, do you know how many units or what the units per acre across the street in Valley Gate are?
I do not. I'm sorry.
But the applicant knows.
Cindy may know.
Commissioner Lennon?
Could you go back to the zoning map,
Sure.
please?
This one?
So, right now you have O and I abutting R15. So if this passes, would you consider this a good transition?
Staff would, yes.
Staff would, okay. On page 14, in the packet, every month we get a table that's created, and I don't know if that can be brought up or not, that shows the traffic
Okay.
impact. And I just wanted to walk through that with some questions. So, tell me when you're there.
I'm there.
Okay,
yes.
sorry. So for those of us who can't see this on the screen, we're looking at existing zoning with what would be permitted by right, with the addition of accessory dwelling units, which are now able to be added across residential zoning districts.
For single-family dwellings, yes,
For
sir.
single-family dwellings, okay. So the sum of those would be 3 units, and then there are there we go, thank you. There are trips projected from those units that are allowed, I'll say by right today. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. And then below that, you showed the proposed zoning of R5 conditional district with the 12 units. I'm asking you this question, but this is for others, the benefit of others too. You're coming up with 6 trips. So my math's a little fuzzy, but you're going from 3 units to 12 units, but you're only doubling the trips. But then I see down here you use the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation, 11th edition, 2021. What is that?
That is the manual that our traffic engineers use to generate this information. And I will say that a lot goes into the back end of these calculations and formulas. And I will add to that the smaller the scale of the project, the less accurate this really is. You're talking about larger projects, it's more clear that there's going to be a separation in the traffic impact. They assign different variables to different types of housing. So a quadruplex, a multifamily townhome, they generally assign higher trips or different trips based on their proximity to, their assumed proximity to transit, to services, those types of things. So they would generally think they would generate less trips.
So it sounds like there's actually some thought and science that goes into the numbers that are put in this analysis.
There's an extreme amount of technical data that goes into what they do to generate these models.
So is it safe to assume that the Planning Commission can rely on the net difference of 3 AM peak trip hours and 2 PM peak hour trips?
To the point that.
With the caveat of what you said, I'm
With
sorry
the
to interrupt.
caveat that these are estimates.
Understood.
These are based on data sets across the country that are used to calculate, to make these formulas work in this manual. So they are estimates, but yes, based on the information that we get and from our traffic engineers that go through all of this, yes, this is something that we've relied on.
They're not based on Mr. Chambers' intuition, in other words.
Thankfully, they are not.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Pollock?
Just to follow up to Commissioner Lennon's discussion, because I think traffic's probably going to be a hot button for months to come, maybe years to come, for this body and for City Council and others. Do I understand, Brian, from what you just said, that there's obviously a level of expertise, but how much subjectivity? I mean, is there a lot of subjectivity into this thing?
When you're dealing with engineers,
They
try to remove as much subjectivity as possible from the information they want to provide to you. They want to be as accurate as possible, and they do put a lot of thought into the types of land use codes they use to generate these models. Each one has its own set of variables, and they want to be as accurate as possible based on the information in front of them.
And that's fair. I asked the question only to just understand the methodology.
And I'm not throwing any engineers under the bus.
And that never would think that you would, but thanks. Appreciate the clarification.
You're good. Thank you. And the applicant is here.
I'm Cindy Wolf, representing the owners and potential developer of the property. It's interesting, this particular parcel was actually originally part of the Barclay Place Apartments. It's sort of an out parcel, if you will, because it is separated along the back property line of this parcel by a drainage easement. But originally, before Barclay Place Apartments were created, this was part of that larger tract. Although the property behind us is still zoned R15, it is part of the Barclay Place Apartments pond. It just never got rezoned because it wasn't necessary. As far as the Valley Gate Villas across the road, they are zoned MD17, so that density is up to 17 units an acre. I heard from behind me that there are 72 units over there. I'm not real clear on how much acreage is actually there, but based upon the MD17, it is somewhere between 10 and 17 units an acre. Otherwise, they would have been zoned MD10 back at the time when it was MF10 or whatever. This is another case of R5 development, which allows attached single-family homes. All of these homes are two-story with a single-car garage with a dual driveway pad. And as she pointed out, initially we worked with a couple different variations of this. We had a 2, we had a 3, we had a 7 across the back. Anyway, it has always been the 12 units. However, we took a closer look and we found that it was important to align our driveway with the one at Valley Gate, just for safety purposes of circulation, although the offset would have been sort of not the head-on situation. The TRC preferred that we align that as possible. She pointed out that this is on the master plan for walkways across the city, so instead of a sidewalk along our frontage, we'll be responsible for a multi-use path, and that multi-use path then will take the dogleg right and stub into the Barclay Place Apartments. We had the existing trees located. This is a little bit, Valley Gate Villas are two-story. That's what we're proposing. In the footprint that you see in the upper right-hand of the corner, that is 8 units. So you can sort of compare the 2-story, 8 units, as far as the 2-story, 4 units in a pad is not all that different as far as the footprint that you see. I don't think this elevation was necessarily in the staff's report, but this is the elevation from interior to the design. It would look that way on the right, it would look that way on the left. However, again, to satisfy the attached housing addressing of streets, and that being Long Street, the Long Street elevation, and you can sort of see on the ground floor where the dining room and great room are, the great room has a big triple window section that can be turned into, on those 4 units facing Long Street, some type of French doors or fixed with a door in between, and it is already under a porch. So we've satisfied that criteria. These proposed quadruplexes do provide what we believe is an acceptable transition between the commercial corridor. You've got the 2 gas stations up on Shipyard. There is a veterinarian and then the Boy Scouts building just northwest of us. Infill development, we have public services already. We do have that access to a traffic signal as far as circulation goes. I believe Shipyard Boulevard has a bus route. Location-efficient housing should be promoted and encouraged for sustainability and adaptability of our community. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Adams.
Thanks, Cindy. I got a couple of questions. You said originally this parcel was contiguous with the apartments behind there.
It was sort of a hook over. They had frontage on Long Street, frontage on Independence, and like I said, there is a drainage easement from the large pond then going towards Shipyard. You can see sort of a stream right there.
So related to that, the regional or the master stormwater pond that is there, was it designed to serve a developed percentage of impervious on this tract, maybe similar to the rest that was already developed?
If it was, it is not committed to this track now. It would almost be impossible because of the drainage system between that pond and that drainage easement on our rear. We couldn't get our water across it.
So you'll have to do
we will have
on-site.
our own.
Okay.
And the intention here is the underpavement infiltration in that main drive in the central part of the site. And then overflow is easy because we not only have the private access or the private drainage easement behind us, but a public drainage easement to the southeast.
Okay. And my second question, if you could go back to your illustrative site plan, you're showing sidewalk connectivity to the back of those units to Long Street. My question wasn't necessarily about the architecture this time, but it's, do you know what level of site development happens? And I guess what I'm wondering is things like privacy fences, HVAC units, like what do you envision happening between the face of the building and the new public right-of-way?
I don't know that I can address that, and perhaps Mr. Alderson would. I would imagine in situations like this where we do have a very small setback of the 10 feet, and that's what's preferred in these R5 attached up to streets, we have the sidewalk, but having something like, a 3-foot fence of some sort, just so it delineates what is public and what is private is certainly important. I think the HVAC on the end units is no problem. You put them on the end of the units. The central units would be a little more problematic, but they certainly, for the benefit of the site and the sales, the marketing, to screen them would be important too. And perhaps a similar type of fencing that delineates the sidewalk could be put around an HVAC unit that had to be installed for those 2 central units.
Yeah, and I'm asking this question because I think not just the buildings, but the streetscape need to present the right character to
Yes.
address that.
Absolutely.
This was a big point of discussion on the Holly Tree project that we talked about a month or so ago.
If you
Hi, I'm Patrick Alderson, the proposed developer. It would certainly be the intention to provide fencing to cover anything such as an HVAC unit that would be facing Long Street. I've also had numerous conversations with, well, not numerous, couple conversations with the HOA president across the street regarding landscaping. We certainly intend to put as attractive as possible landscaping all across the front to basically try to join this development to Long Street. We had even discussed trying to match our landscaping with what they have across the street, which she seemed very pleased with. So there will be a quite extensive landscaping buffer, which can be strategically placed to, potentially block anything. But to answer your question, there will be some sort of fencing or barrier that will blend in aesthetically with the units to block that.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Kofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Wolf, you touched on this multi-use path that runs perpendicular to Long Street. And as I was reviewing this packet, I was actually hoping that there would be some type of connection to achieve walkability with Barclay Place Apartments.
Barclay Place Apartments.
And that's what we'll see? That's what the, will that take?
That's what the master plan shows, and so we'll be responsible for it.
Fantastic. And part of that is, as you read into the comprehensive plan and the growth strategies, it talks about the promotion and encouragement of multi-use centers and the placemaking, walkability, and all these, keeping people out of their cars and their ability to walk to services. So along Shipyard, where it's a lot of undeveloped future land use potential, it's great to hear that, for me personally, that folks could walk to whatever may come out of the ground up there.
And over to Independence, because Independence Trail I ride all the time, and it's great.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We will open the public hearing for agenda item number 4. Is anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item 4? Anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item 4? All right, is there anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item number 4? Opposition to agenda item 4. All right, we will close the public hearing. And without any questions or comments to address from the public hearing, commissioners, what are your thoughts? Commissioner Lennon?
Madam Chair and other members of the commission, and particularly Ms. Wolf, I appreciate your patience during my initial, there were comments received online for this today that were distributed to us, I believe 4. And going off memory, the majority of them had to do with traffic. And I would just, for the rest of the commissioners' benefit, the reason I asked those questions was ultimately the impact of this project, even if Brian's intuition is off a little bit, is negligible. And I say that tongue-in-cheek, but we know that there's actual engineering and science that goes into this analysis of the traffic impact. So the part I forgot to mention was that Long Street is functioning at an A capacity, and if I'm reading the other scientific data in this report, it's basically at 20% of its capacity, is what your staff report indicates. So as much as I know people don't like change, this is negligible and to me is addressing a much needed housing requirement.
I agree. It's a really good product that we need more of in the city, the missing middle, as we call it, in the LDC. And it's a very appropriate transition next to the commercial and in between that commercial and some of the single family. It's really textbook transition. So, did somebody else have a comment? Commissioner Adams.
Yeah, I mean, based on the comments that I read too, part of the reason I wanted to understand the acreage and the number of units for Valley Gate is, according to GIS, that's 5 acres, so that's 14 units an acre across the street versus 10 for what we're proposing. So there's actually less density on this site. So I think that's something to note. I do want to go back to the streetscape a little bit along Long Street, and I just want to make sure that these they don't put a totally fenced off, I'm going to shut out everything, because there's a desire, a lot of cases, to have your backyard be private, but I think it would be, again, maybe a mistake and not the best sort of face to that public right-of-way if the whole back of that building had 6-foot privacy fences, particularly since you're showing connectivity to sidewalks. So, but I mean, I agree. I think it's a good project and is trying to accomplish a lot of things with transition and infill development.
Commissioner Pollack?
Just more of a general comment. Absolutely applaud Commissioner Lennon for bringing the traffic discussion up, because it's going to be a challenge that we have collectively going forward, and I'd be the first to say there's no right answer. That's why I appreciate Mr. Chambers' discussion about the model and how it's used. So I'm agreeing with Commissioner Lennon. I mean, this does look, based on all that, like a minimal impact. I mean, there's always going to be, I look at how this is designed, where you've got this development emptying out into, or almost sitting right across from Long Street, or from, the development across the street, and as the potential developer said, he's in conversations with the HOA, and I think it sounds like you guys are trying to work through things, and I don't know what else to do. I think we've assessed the traffic on this particular case. I mean, I think it's a reasonable assessment, and I don't see that on this particular case as a stumbling block at all. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, how often do we see a level of service A come through here? All right, what's the will of the commission?
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Commissioner Woodruff.
Move to approve agenda item number 4, case number CD 5823, regarding 114 Long Street Drive, rezoning from R15 to R5 conditional district. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington: Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. Planning Commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest because the proposal would allow for a compatible infill development and would increase the housing stock in an existing residential area. Therefore, the Planning Commission recommends approval of this request along with any staff recommendations or conditions.
6.
6? Okay.
All right. The motion has been made by Commissioner Woodruff, seconded by Commissioner Pollack. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion passes 6-0. All right, we are already on agenda item number 5, conditional district rezoning of property containing 3.13 acres located at 610, 614, 618, and 622 South Carr Avenue from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to MD17 CD High Density Multiple Dwelling Residential District Conditional District for a 49-unit residential development. And Ms. Smith will be delivering our staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. The proposal before you this evening includes 4 parcels containing approximately 3.11 acres and is located west of South Carr Avenue and north of Randall Parkway. This map provides context and highlights the site location. To the right of the slide are images of the subject site's existing conditions. This slide illustrates the existing conditions from adjacent roadways. To the right of the slide are images looking north and south on South Carr Avenue. Left of the slide is a view of the site from Hoggard Drive and the existing transit stop located at Hoggard and Varsity. This slide illustrates the existing development pattern within the vicinity. Multifamily developments are located west, north, and east of the site. Single dwellings are located north and south of the site along South Carr Avenue frontage. This area of the city is in transition, as witnessed by the variety of zoning and land uses in the vicinity. The request before you this evening is to rezone the subject site from R10 Medium Density Single Dwelling District to MD17 CD, High Density Multiple Dwelling Residential Conditional District, for a 49-unit residential development. The project includes 2 3-story buildings containing 24 units each and 1 1-story single-dwelling home. A full access driveway is proposed off of South Carr Avenue. The applicant is preserving 21.3% of the property to open space, exceeding the required 20% of the MD17 zoning district. The elevations provided by the applicant are shown on your screen. The eastern elevation on the right is the anticipated visibility from South Carr Avenue. The southern and northern elevations are also included on the left side of your screen. The comprehensive plan identifies this site as within an employment, academic center, and live-work innovation zone area of opportunity, as well as along a major corridor and regional parkway. Areas well suited for infill development should increase densities, with infill development including mid-rise buildings, parking decks, and other urban solutions. The proposed rezoning would allow context-sensitive infill that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Based on the information contained in the case summary and the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, staff believes the request is reasonable and in the public interest and recommends conditional approval with the conditions outlined in your case summary. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. This is also Cindy's last presentation for the evening.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Lennon?
I'm sorry, but I'm on page 16 on the traffic one again. So, and I apologize, can you put that back up?
I didn't do it, I promise.
I know, and I'm sorry, but if you go back to her report. Okay, back. Okay, on that one, those are little buses, right?
Correct. Those indicate where there are existing wave transit stops in the vicinity.
So there's one on Hoggard Drive, one on South Carr, and then 2 more further up South Carr.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now can you go back a few more pictures? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. There's a big aerial shot, it's the one I'm looking for. There you go. So what is that across South College Road? That's UNCW, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Seahawk Cove is primarily student housing?
Potentially.
Potentially. Okay. What I'm getting at is, do the factors of the proximity of UNCW, the abundance of student housing, and the 4 wave transit stops close to the subject site factor into the staff's traffic analysis?
Not what's being reflected in table 3.5.3.c, which I have right here. I think that's what you're asking. Does this is going to be solely relying on the anticipated vehicle trips affiliated with the request. It does not take into consideration alleviation with some of the other multimodal transit options that are coming online along Carr Avenue to make that safe connection to
Okay,
UNCW.
let me go at the same thing a different way. So there's not this nice little disclaimer at the bottom of this one that was on the last one of reference to the manual?
The manual is the resource for this data.
Okay. Then would it be reasonable to assume that the manual takes into account everything that I just referenced, the proximity of UNCW, the 4 transit stops?
As previously indicated, these statistics are being generated on the anticipated uses across the nation, so it's not factoring local data into this analysis.
See Mr. Chambers grabbing his microphone.
The data on the screen does not take into account the local situation, the specific stops adjacent to this site, the proximity to our university, It would be more general, like Ms. Smith said. When you look at multifamily, they generally assume they're close to transit and services and education and whatnot, but it doesn't take into account this specific situation with the 4 stops and being within, half a mile or quarter mile from the UNCW campus.
So arguably, the actual impact, and I know we can't prove this, but based on that aerial showing where this subject property is, could be even less than what's projected in the
I think
staff.
that's a safe argument to make, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for staff? Commissioner Pollak?
I guess I need to probe that a little more because, all we have to go on is the table that you put in our packet. And that table to me suggests that, you got effectively a non-traffic generating lot that we're talking about, or plot of ground. And this table to me suggests that there's the potential for, 333 more average weekday 2-way volume trips. All right? So this is what we have to go on, and I appreciate Commissioner Lennon's, delving into this table and what the data suggests, but, naked view looking at this table suggests, is this what generated this? This is a trip estimate. How old is this estimate? And especially if we're not taking into account local data, that kind of bothers me a little bit because, I'm a great believer in national averages and, et cetera, but, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but traffic's an issue in this city. There's just no doubt about it. So, to me, I look at this and it says 333, more trips, 2-way trips a day. What are we as a city, relative to this development? What's happening? Is there going to be anything on Kerr or Carr Avenue, however you pronounce it, that's going to alleviate what I see on this table?
It's a little bit to unpack there. The data you see, just like it's the same manual used for all of our cases. It's the most recent manual that the traffic engineers use to generate these trips. And yes, they're based on variables that go across data sets that are across the country. This is but one thing in our case summary we use to analyze what the impact is going to be on the traffic. There are several policies that we review in our comp plan that suggest that we should have increased density on transit routes, near services. They're consistent with our Live Work Innovation Zone, where you want to have living and working in the same area. That takes into account the proximity to the educational system, the academic support in this area, in this particular area of opportunity. So there are other parts of our analysis specific to our comp plan that speaks specifically to where you want growth to occur. And in this case, it's close to services, it's on a transit line, it's close to the university, so it's taken into account in another way outside of just the raw numbers that are generated for this trip generation.
So the assumption would be all the factors you just, referenced and mentioned, the assumption would be that would drive down, projected traffic because there's other ways to get to different places.
Right. My thought would be we're using raw data from a trip generation manual that does not take into account the proximity to a number of transit stops, the proximity to the university. So to me, it would be on the conservative or on the high side of the trip gen because you're not taking into account those things. There are other modes of transportation here that are available to folks, and the proximity to the services, grocery store being within walking distance, the university being within walking distance. Granted, you got to get to a safe crossing to do those things, but the services are nearby.
Oh yeah, very familiar with the road, that area. So yeah, okay. I think this traffic may be a different discussion maybe later in the evening, after we get done with the cases. But yeah, I'm good for now.
Yes, sir.
I was also going to take the opportunity to plug the efforts that the city is making because we are recognizing that we need to consider multimodal options as we continue to grow as a city. And on your screen is one of the capital improvement projects that the city is investing in to make multimodal options more attractive and more safe for the anticipated residents as well as the existing residents.
Commissioner Lennon?
When was that project approved? Was it part of the 2014 bond project?
It is part of the bond projects. It is in acquisition currently, and construction is anticipated to begin
Which I'm ecstatic about.
in 2024.
Okay. So this is not a recent?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith and applicant, welcome back. Ms. Wolf?
One last time, I'm Cindy Wolf, and obviously this is a multifamily project, so a little bit of diversity that I talked about early on. My client amassed the 4 subject parcels and, believe me, tried his darndest to include that corner parcel, because I think it would behoove us all to have that potential for access over to Varsity, over to Hoggard, and hopefully we'll see a signal someday at Hoggard. These are all hopes and wishes, but unfortunately, as hard as he tried, it was to no avail. That particular owner apparently is an investor with a mega number of rentals and just had no interest in becoming part of it or selling that property. So that comes into play with, of course, our site design and some of the conditions that I know are part of it. This corridor along Carr Avenue, along Randall, the intersection of Randall and Carr Avenue are rife with apartments. This is the right place for it because they are accessible to services, possibly not at this point as walkable as we'd like, but we do have the bus routes, both the Wave service and the UNC shuttle along Carr Avenue. So that makes a big difference in the amount of traffic and who rents where. This is the plan that we came up with. It's been vetted initially by the TRC. One of the big parts, and they're a little vague in this, but are the trees behind the existing house. There are, as Nicole pointed out, 4 existing structures, and I think also an accessory dwelling or 2. There's a bunch of structures other than the one house that has been renovated and is going to be saved as part of this project. But the other houses, I just wanted to point out, have been committed to an associate of my clients who's going to move them a little closer to downtown on individual lots. So we've got a win-win rehab situation where we're not actually losing homes. The project provides what you would certainly expect as far as parking. We have stubbed to that adjacent property line to the south with the hope that someday it would connect over to Hoggard Drive. One of the comments that was made earlier was the possibility, obviously, we have Candlewick condominiums at our rear corner, if you will, but the property to the north of us is still zoned R15. If necessary, certainly the end of that parking lot that we have the backing stub at, that would be another opportunity for interconnectivity if it ever came up. That's the color version of it. The trees behind that existing residence pop up. All of that tree symbol are existing significant trees. So we're working a lot with an arborist and would continue to do so to make sure the preservation of those trees in particular, because it's a great little grove. It'll provide an open space and is adjacent to the community amenity of the swimming pool. These are the initial artist's rendering or architect's renderings of what the building would look like from the parking, the 2 buildings from the parking area. And in this particular case, as a multifamily, there is a provision that it needs to address the street. And so not only do we have fenestration differences in materials, we have doors and windows facing this. There's a mail station at the end that would probably be covered. And we have an access out of the building where the woman is walking in. The central part of the building is one of the corridors that run through the building. Evolving development, as far as traffic is concerned, I think all good points have been made. The national statistics and the national numbers that come up with these parking things. And I know, Mr. Pollack, you were concentrating on the on the two-way all day long. The larger numbers that sometimes look, oh my Lord, but they are 24 hours, and I think that's important when that translates to the high traffic times, which is the AM peak and the PM peak. It isn't as intimidating, I believe. But evolving development obviously increases trip generation, we know that, but that eventually translates into traffic improvement projects. We have a lot of traffic in the city, but when things get unmanageable is when things are funded for improvements, and I guess that's all I can really say about it. It will continue to be an issue, but I don't think it is an issue that should stop the best development of our town. So with that, I would be happy to answer questions you have, and certainly the developer is here with me tonight if there's questions I can't answer.
Commissioner Pollack?
I'm going to go right back at you on the
Okay.
traffic, and it's more of just a statement. It is, the topic is real, and I know Commissioner Lennon and everybody sitting up here believes it. So I think the reason we ask the questions we ask is obviously to challenge, the integrity of the project, but, hopefully there are people that are tuning in and listening to this broadcast, and we're able to help educate folks on how some of this works. And sometimes, it's frustrating, and sometimes it's not, but it's, I think we have an obligation to, to educate folks. So I think that's part of the reason we ask the questions on the traffic, and I know they may sound a little indicting. They're not, at least for me, they're not intended to be. It's just, it's an education for me and for folks that are participating in this project.
Certainly.
Or like the mayor says, thank you for the folks that take part, active part in their city. So that's why I asked the question. So just a comment.
Commissioner Adams?
Two-part question. First one's sort of very direct. Is this intended to be student-directed or student
It
housing?
really is not.
Okay. Second question related to that is, in MD 17, required parking is generally dictated by number of bedrooms in addition to unit count. I couldn't find a unit mix anywhere in here because that would ultimately drive what the parking is required. So how did you come about the minimum parking required without a unit mix? Because if it is a student housing project, typically they have much more bedrooms per unit than a market rate. So I'm curious how you arrived at your parking calculations.
The footprints we have in the preliminary floor plan design is 48 two-bedroom units.
Okay.
The place I saw it was in the parking requirement table.
Oh, and I'll elaborate on that then. Basically,
said two-bedroom.
two-bedroom units are required to have, in this particular case, two spaces per bedroom. You are allowed to have up to 2.5 spaces per bedroom, and I don't recall what my numbers are, but we have adequate, what we believe is adequate additional parking for guests and overflow.
Commissioner Adams?
So since you brought up guests, the site plan that I'm looking at has a red oval with around what look like access control gates.
Initially, we believe that the type of community we're trying to create, not being student, and the security that people want when they're looking for a place to live, we are proposing the security gate. It is more of a security gate that would be open all day long. It certainly, there's not gates, it's not a gated community in any way, shape, or form. But at night, our community just deals with sometimes, theft. That would prevent, and we have more than enough stem length to allow for a security gate in that location. So that's all there was to it.
Okay, but you don't have any, I'm going to say, visitor parking outside that?
No. Because of the stem length necessary for any type of gate, it would all be internal.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for the applicant? Commissioner Kofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Wolf, for your presentation. Just, I reached out earlier with a question, and I kind of fall on the heels of some of the traffic conversation, but when these projects come through TRC and the developer's trying to do all they can to create interconnectivity, you know, at first when I was looking at this, because my vision is becoming impaired, I didn't realize that you had stub outs to the north and south. Is that?
We don't have
don't.
stub outs to the north at this point. That's a residential, where we would be required to buffer it. Obviously, we would also be required to buffer the property to south since they did not participate in the rezoning. There'll still be a single family in an R15. All I was saying, based upon some of that interconnectivity dialogue, was you can see the way that parking lot is, that we're not preventing that from ever happening if my client were to continue developing up the road or something like that.
I guess that's what, it's more a comment than a question, just in regards to the, well, I think it was a recommended condition number 6, the future cross-access connection. It may not be intended to ever become a stub or a connection, but at least it's there. And it also looks like, you know, potentially if we could get a connection in the future to
Candlewick?
Plum Nearly Lane, which
Well,
would be to the
that's to the
west,
south.
southwest, sort of, I guess. Yeah.
There is a large ditch. There is a
Is that
major
okay?
public drainage easement across the back, and it's in a floodplain. So there would never be anything out the back. I mean, I think I can confidently say that.
Okay.
But were we able to connect over to Hoggard, that would be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to Commissioner Pollock's comments with regards to traffic, I mean, anytime a site could create that cross connection and so that the stack and the queue is not one way in, one way out, we're allowing two-way traffic or multi ingress egress points is certainly a positive. And to comment on as well what Madam Chair had mentioned earlier, this to me is a textbook site for some increased intensity and density. It really checks all the boxes with regards to the color wheel from not just staff, but our growth strategies maps and everything that I've kind of cross-referenced when I look at these. So it's yet another textbook, in my opinion. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you all.
thank you. All right, time to open the public hearing on item number 5. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item 5? All right, anyone here to speak in opposition of agenda item number 5? Anyone here to speak on agenda item 5? Public hearing is closed with no comments or questions to address from the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your thoughts on this? Commissioner Woodruff.
Just a couple comments. I don't know what the numbers are, but out of 10, it seems like 7 to 8 times that we get a project in here, we're talking about traffic. And I'm feeling almost guilty because I don't fault the developer. They're doing what we as the Planning Commission and what the city is asking for. And yet it seems to me that it's falling on us when we approve it and it goes up and gets approved. You've got these, what I'm considering to be dangerous situations. The last couple big ones, I think this one is a potential nightmare. You look at the only point of ingress and egress, it's right across the street from the Seahawk Cove. It's down the street a matter of maybe 100 feet from Hoggard Drive. Getting in and out is just going to be dangerous. I'm voting for this project. I mean, the developer can't do anything. They've tried everything they can. I don't know where the help has to come from. It was already brought up. Cindy mentioned, when it gets bad, it gets funded. I think it's bad. And I think we need some direction from council or wherever to consider these aspects of doing what I don't mind doing, the infill, but we've got to have the infrastructure to make them safe.
Commissioner Lennon?
I don't disagree. but I also don't know of any municipality in the United States of America that builds their transportation infrastructure and then grows into it. I remember when Eastwood and Military Cutoff were two-lane roads going both ways, and now they're getting ready to build a flyover on it, because I would have chosen more eloquent words, Ms. Wolf, but things got so jammed up, we had to do something about it. To me, it's simple. What's the alternative? We gonna stop? I mean, what happens then? So I think that the reason I asked the questions that I did tonight about the traffic, and I apologize to the applicant because you're getting the bulk of the traffic conversation, but a lot of thought goes into the impacts of these projects. It is in no way feasible to go out and build roads and then to develop. Who's going to fund that? Who's going to pay for it? So I think that the other thing that's forgotten is the majority of infrastructure, roadway infrastructure. I think I'm right when I say this. We don't own it. The state of North Carolina owns it. So it's not up to us to fund it. It's up to the state of North Carolina to fund it. So I think we have to take it into account, but I think there's a larger impact on human life to provide reasonable accommodations for people to live in the city.
Commissioner Pollack?
I'm going to play Switzerland here, because I agree with what Commissioner Lennon says, and I also agree with Commissioner Woodruff. And just, I would make a recommendation that, as you said, Commissioner Lennon, the bulk of the traffic discussion's kind of coming out right now. I'd like to tee that up for, after we get done with item number 6, because I think it's a very viable discussion. And you're right, this isn't a build it and they will come kind of a thing, but I think somehow, as a commission, we probably need to get a little tighter alignment with the traffic folks and the engineers, and maybe it's a planning session or something, I don't know, but let's tee that up, if you will, to maybe items from the commission after we get done with the other applicants, because I don't want to. You got a lot of folks sitting here yet waiting for item number 6, so, but I'd like to tee that up tonight yet if we can.
Commissioner Adams?
Just real quick, I want to build on some of the positives that Commissioner Kofer talked about. The story of reusing one of the houses and repurposing it, and I think is really creative and just a good thing to do. I like that idea even better when you talked about some of the houses were going to be relocated and reused. So I think there's some good stories there that are part of this project. Also, I just appreciate that Sean Hostetler's done a good job with the architecture. It's distinctive, it's modern, it's fresh. It doesn't look like all the other cookie cutter stuff that we see around town often, and it addresses Carr Avenue in a good way. So I think this is a great project.
Thank you. What is the will of the commission?
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Pollack?
I vote that the commission adopts agenda item number 5, which is the request of 610 through 622 Carr Avenue, rezoned from R10 to MD17. Request is consistent with the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, and the commission considers, easy for me to say, the commission considers its approval to be reasonable and in the public interest because the proposal allows context-sensitive infill that is compatible with the existing physical development pattern in the area.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Pollack has moved to approve agenda item number 5. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Adams? In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes 6-0. And the folks here for agenda item number 6, and you've been waiting a long time, and I'm so sorry to do this, but we need to take a break for the closed captioner. So we will take about a 10-minute break, and we'll be back at 8:20 to get things started with agenda item 6. Well, it's 8:19. I'm going to go for it. We'll call the Planning Commission meeting back to order. Our last item is agenda item number 6, and Commissioner Lennon has requested recusal. Could we have a motion to recuse Commissioner Lennon?
Can we recuse Commissioner Lennon?
Second.
Second with Commissioner Adams. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Rejoin us after this item. Item 6 is a conditional district rezoning of property containing 7.696 acres located at 3903, 3907, 3909, 3913, and 3915 Carolina Beach Road from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to MD 17 CD High Density Multiple Dwelling Residential Conditional District for a 225-unit multiple dwelling residential development. And Mr. Chambers is up to provide our staff report.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. The site is located on the east side of Carolina Beach Road, just south of Independence Boulevard. Contains about 7.7 acres. That currently has 3 single-dwelling lots and a commercial business. This map shows the site within the surrounding area. You see Food Line to the north, the Crossroads Center with Harris Teeter directly across the street. We have several photos of the subject site from Carolina Beach Road. And there's some photos of the surrounding properties. The site is surrounded by residential and commercial zoning. A storage facility is located to the north. Single-dwelling residential is located directly south. As previously mentioned, the Crossroads Center is located across the street, as well as some other single-dwelling uses. And a vacant tract is located to the east, which is part of the Barclay West development. The applicant is proposing to rezone this site to an MD 17 conditional district, again for a 225-unit residential development. The project includes the 225 units located in 3 4-story buildings. The site was designed around several specimen trees that will be retained on site, and those will be the green circles you see on the site plan. The project does include the construction of a new residential collector street connecting to the Carolina Beach Road to provide access to the site, and this street would stub to the eastern property line and allow for a future road connection to Barclay West. The project also includes a private drive that would stub to the south that would allow for a road connection if and when that site redevelops. I would like to point out that the preliminary plan for this project will be reviewed by our Design and Justice Committee on August 16th, and they'll be looking at the road infrastructure as part of that preliminary plan. Based on the estimated trip gen, a traffic impact analysis was required. This analysis was approved in December of last year. It requires the construction of a northbound right turn lane on Carolina Beach Road and requires that this new street connection to Carolina Beach Road be configured as a right-in, right-out access only. The project does generate more than 1,000 daily vehicle trips and has frontage on a high-capacity transit route, so the project will require the installation of a transit stop with improvements. The project would also be required to install a multi-use path along the Carolina Beach Road frontage. The proposal would require a minimum of 342 parking spaces, and the applicant is proposing 348. There would be a minimum of 30 bicycle parking spaces, and the applicant proposes 45. The project sets aside 10% of the units for workforce housing for a period of 15 years, and these units would be dispersed throughout the site. And a 20-foot wide transitional buffer will be required adjacent to any existing single dwelling, which would be the property located to the south. The site is located within a greenfield site mixed-use place area of opportunity along a high-capacity transit route. Our comprehensive plan calls for infill development that maintains and enhances the desired character and increases housing options. The plan calls for increased residential density along identified transit routes and near commercial services. And the plan supports the completion and extension of existing street network. And the plan also supports building and site designs that avoid the removal of significant trees. The proposed rezoning allows for compatible infill development, provides for an increase in density near services and along a transit route. includes a workforce housing component. It adds to the existing street network of the area and preserves a number of specimen trees. Staff does believe this request is consistent with our comprehensive plan. The request is reasonable in the public interest, and we are recommending conditional approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is prepared to make a presentation as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? Commissioner Adams?
Brian, just one clarification about condition 8. The requirements of the approved TIA must be completed prior to receiving final zoning approval. I think that means the requirements are agreed upon, not built and implemented, right?
Built and implemented before final zoning.
But zoning approval, you mean basically
You
acceptance?
gotta, they have to be in place before you get a certificate of occupancy for the structures.
That's what.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Pollack?
Kind of a follow, same discussion, Brian. If I look at your site plan, excuse me, sorry, we're going to funnel, like you say, right turn in, right turn out. So right turn out is going to pull out, get onto Carolina Beach Road and go straight to Independence, right? I mean, that's kind of the first major intersection we're driving traffic to.
Yes, sir. This is just south of that intersection.
Okay. I ask that because it just seems like there's a lot more stuff going on to Independence Avenue as the days go by. So I just want to be clear on what that's
Yes,
saying.
sir.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kofer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chambers, may have learned this earlier, so off-street parking, when we talk about the 348 spaces that are proposed, does that or does that not include these garage bays, which would be an additional 30, or it's included in there, 348?
I believe it includes all of the off-street, the on-street, and the garages.
And that, so everything encompasses
The
348?
parking under the building, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. And the applicant is here.
Thank you.
Hello. Good evening, Madam Chair and Planning Commission. Thank you for your time. My name's Owen Hartman. I work for Millstone Management as a developer, and we have our entire team here as well, who can also answer any questions that may arise. So, Brian, thank you for being cooperative and working with us throughout the process as well. It's been really helpful. So, here's a city aerial of our site. We're located 4 miles approximately south of downtown Wilmington. Here's a site aerial a little bit closer in, showing exactly where we are. We're on the southeast quadrant of Carolina Beach Road and Independence, next to a self-storage facility and the Point at Barclay Town Center. Here's a street view from the south end of the site looking north off of Carolina Beach Road. And this is at the northern portion of our site looking across the street at the Harris Teeter development. Here's our site plan, 3 buildings, all 3 are 4-story. All 3 residential buildings are 4-story. We have a single-story leasing clubhouse as well. As Brian mentioned, there are 3 specimen trees that we designed the site around. We do have 30 detached garages, and what's interesting about this development is that we do have conditioned corridors, which is unique to the market, so there are no open breezeways. And there are also parking spaces that are integral to the buildings where you can pull into the building, walk directly into the corridor and into the unit or to the elevator. Here are building elevations. The first one is the front of the building, which faces Carolina Beach Road. So that's what you'll be seeing as you drive past. On the rear side of the building, that shows the integrated garages as well, where you can pull into those garages and directly into the corridors. Here's a side elevation. So on the front-facing building, or the building facing Carolina Beach Road, this is what would be on the north and the south portion of the building. In December, we received WAMPO approval after submitting our TIA, and this is just the approval letter here. There are 3 commitments that we made based on the WAMPA approval. We're going to have a northbound right turn lane with a 50-foot decel. We're going to have a 100-foot internal protected stem, which you can see on the site plan. And we're going to have stop controls for westbound approaches. We had a discussion with the Cape Fear Housing Coalition, and this is a letter of support. It didn't exactly transfer over, but you do see the signatures down below. We are providing 10% of our units as workforce housing. Those units will be at or below 80% AMI, and we're excited to bring those to market. Our site is located within a greenfield multi-use area of opportunity, which represents the greatest potential for growth and future infill development. So we intentionally selected this site in this location for this reason, in that it seems as if it's an area where the city wants to see infill development, and that's exactly what we're bringing at this location. This table was referenced previously, but this is just indicating the total demand in the market and the undersupply as well, that we're going to be bringing more units and helping that as well. So community benefits for this project, we are bringing the workforce housing component, which we're excited to do. It's going to be a Class A luxury product with different offerings that most projects don't have, like that I mentioned, the interior corridors that are conditioned, as well as top of market amenities. And all of our workforce units, of course, will have the same finish levels, and all the tenants will have the same experiences across the board. So we're excited to offer that. As I mentioned previously, it is an infill development within the greenfield multi-use area. I already touched on the elevator served conditioned corridors, but in our neighborhood meeting, which was a very positive meeting with the community, one of the things that they were very excited for was just the accessibility of this project, being that all residential buildings have elevators.
That's 5 minutes, but if you need a few more, your last item, so you caught me at a
My
good
last
moment.
item, yeah, is just a carefully balanced design, which Brian was really helpful with, designing around all the specimen trees, creating more open space. And there was a previous applicant that brought this site to market, and we've loosened up the density to achieve, all of those items. So,
Okay, thank you.
thanks.
Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Woodruff?
Can you pull back up the screen that had the thing about the traffic?
Yep.
Whatever it was you want to call it. There you go. The 3 bullet points down there. I noticed in the report on the community meeting, it said one of the items was people talked issues regarding traffic lanes and whatever. Were the 3 points here? Well, I also noted that you didn't change the plans from what you had, at that time. Did these 3 points at least address what the community concerns were? Or were there any that aren't addressed by the community?
So what we're doing by developing this project, and we've been working closely with Brian and his staff. Currently, there are 5 ingress-egress points. There are 4 separate parcels that we're combining into one. So there are currently 5 ingress-egress points on the Carolina Beach Road. So what we're doing here is we're eliminating those 4 of those and having 1 ingress-egress point.
That's a right in, right out.
It is a right in, right out, correct. There is an emergency access for fire to the south that will not be utilized by our residents, and there'll be signs and it'll be blocked off. So we're reducing the overall number of accesses, and then these controls were recommended by WAMPO, and we're happy to comply with all of those.
Okay, what is, I don't know what provide the stop controls for westbound approach. What is that talking about? The last of the bullet points.
Good evening. My name is Allison Ingebretson. I'm with Paramount Engineering, and we've been working with these folks designing this project. The reference to the westbound approach is the 100-foot protected stem that's inside the project itself.
It's inside the project. Okay.
Yes, and if I could maybe elaborate on one of the previous questions, some of the discussion at the community meeting was quite positive. Some folks in the area were really excited to see connection points that could go to future growth. So the traffic conversation was actually not negative. It was very positive and hopeful.
So don't leave, kiss me. The first bullet point talks about northbound traffic. What about southbound traffic?
The southbound traffic did not have any improvements required of it. It is just that right turn lane.
Okay, but southbound would be if you're coming from downtown Wilmington on Carolina Beach Road, going
Correct.
south, how do you make a left turn into the project?
There is a median there, so you would have to go down and come back around.
How far down?
I believe you have to go to George Anderson, which is the next intersection, and it is a lighted intersection.
All right. And the same, I guess, if somebody's coming out of the project going and wants to go to Carolina Beach Road, they got to go up to the main intersection at Independence?
Correct.
And U-turn and back?
Yes. There is a left turn lane that begins across from the frontage of this property, so that is something that's been installed, but it wouldn't necessarily be accessed by the people exiting this site.
I say there's a median there, right? I mean, they can't get to it.
No, I'm sorry, there's a turn lane on our project side.
On your side.
Going
okay.
towards Independence.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
I have a follow-up TIA kind of question. Sorry. You mentioned a previous applicant had brought a project that had more density than this one originally. These improvements, were they based on your density or the previously proposed higher density? If you want to take it.
So yes, we kept the existing TIA that was done with the higher unit count as is. We're not challenging that. We'll put in those improvements, even though the project we're proposing is a lesser density.
Good. Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Cofer?
Thank you. Yes. Well, two points to just discuss while you're here, the height and the parking. We've had several applications come before us with 4-story designs that, capped around 45, 50 feet. I've also been on this commission when a 5-story project was brought to us at 60 feet. So what I'm seeing here is 4 stories at 68 feet. Why is that so dramatically different than the other proposals? Is it a ceiling height of 10 feet, or is it something like that going on? Or
You can take that. He's the construction guy.
Yeah. My name is Adrian Danamiller. I'm one of the principals of Millstone. So we tried to interpret the building height restrictions allowance with our designers and come up with a height that would be at least adequate. But each story is roughly 11 to 12 feet. So there's 4 of those, so that's 48 feet max. And then we have a pitched roof. We just wanted to make sure we got a height on there that was high enough to accommodate all that height. We want to have a varied roof line with architectural features like dormers and kind of like corner accents. And just to be able to accommodate those architectural features to make it look good, we picked that height, basically. We thought it could accommodate that.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating there. The second question I would have is parking. If you could potentially go back to the slide that mentioned the quasi-public access. And I'd asked Mr. Chambers earlier on the parking count of 348, and there's 225 units, so we just double that to 450 per se if everybody had 2 cars. what am I seeing with this quasi-public, what are we seeing with this quasi-public street? Is that being included in this, in this parking count, the 348?
Yes, the angled parking along that street is part of the total parking calculation.
Okay, and there is no under-building parking, correct?
There are integral garage spaces included in the building furthest to the left and furthest to the right on this plan.
So
those grayed out areas all have tuck-under garages under them.
They do, okay.
Yeah.
So then we've got that building to the far left along Carolina Beach Road. In between, to the right of that is a detached garage.
Yep.
So dual-sided there. And everything we're seeing here on the screen comes to the number 348.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
And just a little clarity on the word quasi-public street. Can we hear a little more on what that is?
Yeah, so that, this plan is an iteration that came before we had a few more conversations with planning staff. It's actually going to be a private street.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Is that what you're going to?
Both the one that goes along the top and then also the one that goes between the building with the leasing clubhouse and the L-shaped building on the right.
Is that part of your design adjustment committee proposal?
Yes. Part of what we'll be asking for when we go to design adjustment committee includes variances related to the parking and circulation. We've talked through quite a few options of how to do that. It's challenging when you're doing other things like putting the multi-use path out front, preserving the specimen trees, and just trying to design a thoughtful site design. So that was one of the things we talked about the most, and we came up with this. I also providing the connectivity as a big dictator of how you lay that out. So yeah, this is kind of what we settled on through the process of having all those discussions.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Adams?
Forgive me if I get in the weeds a little bit, but you'll see where I'm going with this. With pitched roofs and 4 stories, where are you proposing to put all your HVAC units?
So that'll come a little bit later in the development of the design, but I can't answer it. Typically with a product like this, and it would almost be a necessity on this, what we'll do is we'll pitch the roof back, and then we'll leave about a 10 to 15 foot section out in the middle and create a little parapet wall that you can't even see from the road because it just looks like a pitched roof going up to a peak from the ground. And then there's a little mechanical well in there where they're all screened and we just line them up and put them in.
That's a good answer because, again, a common theme for some of these projects tonight that I've been focused on is streetscape and what happens between public right-of-way and edge of building. So with the multi-use trail there, if you were going to say you had a bunch of condenser units on the ground along Carolina Beach Road, I think that would be a problematic thing. So I think having a roof well is a much better way to do it.
Yeah, and we hip the roof on the end, so you really can't see them at all from the ground. It's kind of like, yeah, a roof well, just like you described. So
thank you.
They'll be well screened.
All right, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of agenda item number 6? Speak in favor of item 6. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of agenda item number 6? Anyone here to speak in opposition to agenda item 6? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. And having nothing to address from the public hearing, we'll turn it back over to the commissioners for deliberation.
Madam Chair, if it pleases the commission, I would just like to ask Commissioner Adams a little more on this height. I mean, it's 4-story at 68 feet, and we just looked at Summerwalk in July where there was concerns over 5-story, which was less than 68 feet. So I just figured, you know, I can't read your mind, but you can help educate this board on what we're seeing there.
I think the applicant's in the ballpark when they talk about wood frame construction. If you're trying to achieve 9-foot ceilings, you're generally looking at a 10.5-foot floor to floor. So an 11-foot floor to floor is pretty typical and normal. Brian, what I can't remember, if you're using a pitched roof, is your allowable height measured to the midpoint of the pitched roof? So, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I think, again, if you're talking about a typical 11-ish floor to floor, your pitched roof, if it's nothing too steep, is, you know, your building height is going to be 55 feet, maybe, somewhere in that range, would be my guess.
And that's sort of what my math was shaking out to. It's just, I don't understand where the additional 13 feet or yeah, comes from. And if it pleases the chair, I can invite you back up. I'm not sure if we can do that.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me back up to address a question. We didn't do I think I agree with Commissioner Adams that we're not going to use all that 68 feet. I don't think it won't be that tall. We just knew that the code allowed, I think, some maximum height that was greater than that, and we picked a height that was somewhat less, but we knew would be enough. I think what your expectation could be is that each floor will be 11 to 12 feet, so to the ceiling of the top floor would be about no more than 48 feet. And then when we actually do that mechanical well design that we were talking about, that kind of cuts a little bit of the top of the roof off and makes the peak a little lower, because it's not going all the way to the peak. You stop it and create the well. So, I mean, really, realistically, I think it'll be less than 60 feet. We just haven't developed our plans enough to put the exact number on that, so we chose 68. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does, and this came up earlier in one of the other applications with regards to allowable by right 35 feet, and you know the R districts, and this applicant wanted to do 2 stories. So we have how many stories does a project call for, and how many feet, you know, can you do by right, or what's approved, at least in the conditional district rezonings. So it satisfies my question. Thank you.
And don't forget the workforce housing component releases them from that. And the 68 feet isn't conditioned in, so.
Madam Chair, that 68 feet, I believe, is on the site plan, so the site plan would be per approved.
Okay, yeah, the site, I can't read the site plan.
And again, I apologize for that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chambers, I don't see it on the site plan. Is it referenced there?
It's in the dimensional standards table.
Okay. Because that will be a condition, that will be approved as the site plan as we see it.
Table, I don't think, oh, on the site plan, this, I think it might be this one. Are we still looking for answering a question? I don't see it. I mean, is the,
What's being shown on the screen is the site plan as presented, and you'll see the provided 68 feet max here.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? What is the will of the oh,
Yeah, I'll just finish that thought with kind of leaving the height hanging out there. I mean, as in regards to the site and the density and the location, and when you definitely cross-reference everything with our comp plan and the growth strategies maps, I mean, this checks a lot of boxes. I think we all can appreciate, you've heard us say it through the previous hearings that came in front, the interconnectivity, especially to Barclay West, you know, allowing that placemaking component to live, work, and play without having to get into a vehicle and go take the family or friends over, you know, walk or bike to all the services that this area offers. So yeah, for me, it's green light tonight.
thanks. Would you like to make the motion?
Sure, I'll give it a go.
That condition we talked about.
All right, if it pleases this commission, I will make a motion to approve.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I apologize greatly for interrupting. We had a discussion with the applicant prior to the meeting, and there was some language in the condition number 13, and I think there was some cross signals about who was going to bring that up tonight. So I just wanted to point out that for condition 13, I think the applicant and with staff with staff's agreement here, we would want to amend condition 13 that says any significant and specimen trees located on site outside of the building footprint and proposed access improvements shall be protected and retained. We would propose to strike proposed access improvements and replace that with essential site improvements. And that's similar to the conditions in the previous cases you've seen tonight, and that was something we agreed with the applicant on prior to the meeting. And again, I apologize deeply for interrupting and not bringing that up earlier.
Okay, you caught us just in time. Commissioner Kofer?
There we go. Just the right one. Okay, so I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item number 6, the request 3903, 3907, 3909, 3913, 3915 Carolina Beach Road from R15 to MD17 Conditional District. This request is consistent with the objectives and policies of the following plans adopted by the City of Wilmington: the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan. We consider this approval to be reasonable and in the public's interest because the proposed rezoning would allow for compatible infill development, provide for an increase in residential density near services and along an identified transit route, provide a workforce housing component, and adds to the existing road network. We would also like to amend one of the conditions, number 13, to read that any significant and specimen trees located on site outside of the building footprint and essential site improvements shall be protected and retained. Does that sound good?
Great, nice job. Commissioner Kofer has moved to approve agenda item 6. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Adams. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we have passed this motion 5-0.
I make a motion that Commissioner Lennon be reinstated.
Thank you. I think we I thought we would have some people at the public hearing. They were. I know, I kept staring at them like, when are you coming up? All right, other items from the commission. I will have one item that we will begin getting larger site plans in our packets in the future packets so we can read them a little easier. Items from the commission?
I just have one, and it's on the off-discussed thing on traffic tonight. I'll just, basically state, I want to get more educated, so Brian, I'll give you and Linda a call and see if you can help me do that. Put me in touch with the right folks so I can better understand how we do traffic analysis here in town.
Yes, we're happy to set that up. We'll get some engineers at the table to help enlighten all of us.
Thank you.
And the MPO puts out annual reports, right? Is that something you could just shoot over to us, the most recent one? Or is that something, would you rather, is it on their website? They used to do a report, like a
The
published
annual report from
report.
the WMPO? Yeah, I can look into that, yes.
Thanks. Anything from the staff?
So speaking of the WMPO, I do want to note that they are kicking off their planning for their next Metropolitan Transportation Plan update, so Navigating Change 2050. And that the first public information session and workshop for input is scheduled for tomorrow evening at 4 p.m. And there will be a series of workshops around the region. There's also a survey available, which I think, Madam Chair, you asked to be circulated to the members of the commission. So that's another way that folks can provide input to that plan. In terms of previous actions, and I'm going to ask Brian to help me out here, we did have a couple of your recommendations from the last meeting that have been continued at the council level. Moonlight Landing, which was the Holly Tree conditional district, that was continued at the request of the applicant so that they could go back and do some work. The proposed RV park on One Tree Lane, they did open their public hearing. That hearing was continued to September 5th, again, for the applicant to provide additional information to council. And the rezoning for Barclay West was approved. Am I missing? There's one other, and I think Brian's going to correct me.
Yes, Barclay was approved. The One Tree Hill was continued to August 15th.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're
So
correct.
the-
August 15th for One Tree Hill and
We've got a
Moonlight
lot of
Landing.
cases going on, a lot of different meetings, so you have to forgive us. But that's the only correction.
Oh, and the project at Independence and Carolina Beach
Yes,
Road
ma'am.
was continued to the September 5th meeting last night.
Was that continued at the request of the applicant or the board or the commission?
It was
or the
actually continued
council?
at the applicant concurred, but it was recommended by staff because they are still in the TIA process.
Commissioner Lennon?
I had a few minutes. A local public radio station is interviewing people about what's important to them. Out of 171 people they talked to, infrastructure came up 22 times, traffic 24, compared to 41 for housing and 29 for the homeless. Just kind of interesting. Not everybody's worried about traffic. More people are worried about housing.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
positive note.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask one question of the commission or Amy or Linda? I guess I'm completing a partial term for a previous commissioner. Is there anything I would have to do to sign up? I think my term probably expires, or do you guys let us know when terms expire, or how does that work here?
I would notify you usually a couple of months before your term expires to let you know that you need to reapply, and really it's basically the same process that you go through to get on the board to start with. Just lets the appointments committee know that you are still interested in remaining on the board, and then they go through their process and would let you know. Because you're doing a partial term, you would be eligible for your next term, if you wish to stay on, would be for a full term. And then you would be eligible for a second full term as well. I can look at the spreadsheet and make sure when you're up for this completion of this term to ensure that we don't miss the date for you to reapply.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks for asking. We'd like to keep you. Commissioner Adams?
I'd had a couple of different conversations with Commissioner Pollack and Mr. Chambers tonight, and I wanted to float the idea of giving some of the new staff members with planning and just, again, Brian's new role, if it would be beneficial, I think it would, for us to maybe just have a joint luncheon or a sort of work session so that, again, we could get to know some of the new faces maybe a little bit in staff. I know in the past, certain planners were dedicated to either certain parts of the city or certain project types. So I think the stronger awareness we can have of what you're doing and who to call and sort of who's on base for what would be, and me personally, very, very helpful. So if you're open to that, I would like to explore just, a way that we could have a little, inroads between the commission and the staff.
We'd be absolutely happy to set that up.
That sounds good. Great idea. Anything else? All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
Any opposed? Have a good night.